Creative Katie here. Welcome to my channel and another art journal tutorial. As you can see, we're going vintage again. So I've taped off the edge and I'm grabbing a whole bunch of free printables, all their French script, they're vintage. I've just done a search and I printed them off and I'm just kind of flipping through and just kind of getting an idea of what I want to do to build my background. Now I'm determined that I want to see some of this at the end, so we'll see how that goes. So I'm ripping them and just layering them on the page just to get a feel for it. And this is like when you start gluing or gessoing, you just clear your mind, and I'm starting to get ideas about what I want to do on this page. Other than doing a vintage page, that's about as far as I got. But as I'm ripping this up and placing it here, I'm just thinking, I'm getting into the creative mode. And there's tons on Pinterest that you can get these free printables. And I decided that the one there with the postage stamps, I ripped it up because just like if you were stamping, you would stamp off the page, and that's how I want to do it. So I have this one. This was a whole collage sheet, and I just cut off the excess, and I'm going to glue this down whole and then layer some of those other papers that you saw me ripping on top of it. So no white is going to be peeking through. And I'm using matte medium. This is Liquitex matte medium. And I'm just in love using this stuff for collage purposes. I'm just finding that it's working so well. I'm getting a minimal amount of wrinkles, and it's just holding everything down, and it's really working well. So if you have gel medium, you can use that. I've used that for years. You can thin it down a little bit. I find it actually seems to adhere faster. I'm not sure if it just soaks into the paper faster. It also seems to dry faster. So there I'm getting those positioned and I'm trying them up. And then here I'm going to rip this again. I'm going to put half at the top and half at the bottom. Now the problem with putting the tape across the top to clean out the gunk, you have to be sure that you don't overlap it. And at the end, you're going to see that I ran into a little bit of trouble, but nothing an X-Acto knife and a little bit of time takes care of. So I think I'm done, and I grab this Crafter's Workshop stencil. It's called Spanish Tile. It was one of my picks from my wish list, and I have yet to put paint through it before the day. So there's paint on it because I just tried it out and I thought, it's kind of got that vintage vibe. And I grab aquamarine blue in the Deco Art Premium line, and I'm adding this in 5 places. It was 3, 3, 5. Odds seem to work. And I've added the blue. Not my typical go-to. I was more wanting to go teal, but forced myself to do it. This is yellow ochre, and it's a lovely, rich, kind of antique-y yellow. And I just thought, that would look really nice. Now, a while ago, I tried a blue and yellow page, and I wasn't really happy with it. It was too bright. So here I am revisiting the blue and the yellow. And I must say, I'm really liking the look. Now, I grabbed this stencil. I'm thinking I might use it as a focal point. Then I found this bird. It was one of the vintage printables, and it had these bluebirds on it. And that kind of gave me an idea. But as I'm looking at these birds, I'm thinking they're a little too small for this page. They'd be great for my quote journal, my 5x7s, ATCs, but for this it didn't work. I grab raw umber, and I have this foam stamp that my friend cut out of her with her Cricut machine. And it has this scroll, and I thought, okay, that's reading to me as being vintage. And I just start stamping this on here, and just that addition of that brown that goes over top of all the different layers just seemed to bring everything together. And right about there, it was like, ah, yes, yes, this is going to work. And, I wanted a little bit of texture. So I grab my gesso. Now, this gesso, it's not heavy gesso, but it is a little bit thick. It's just gotten thicker over time. And I'm just applying it with my fingers. Some of this is seeping under. I'm not too worried about that. This is a vintage page. It's supposed to look worn and rustic and, you know, not all pristine. So I'm pushing it through. And thank you to everybody who sent me good thoughts and wishes after my hand surgery. It's recuperating nicely. The physical therapist said, use it. So I heard, get painting. It's a little awkward painting with the latex glove on, but it beats not doing anything at all. So I take the glazing medium, and that's golden glazing medium, and burnt umber, and mix it up, and I'm applying a wash over top of this, a glaze. Now the glazing liquid keeps it open a little bit longer, so you can play with it, rub it off, and I'm just applying different layers, and I'm absolutely loving this. Now, before I had the Artist Loft burnt umber, and the color wasn't making me happy. It was almost done, so I went and I bought the Liquitex, and it is so my happy place when it comes to brown. It's a really big difference in my mind. So just because it has the same name doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the same effect. So I'm absolutely loving this background. I can you see all the print coming through from those printables that I put? Score. I finally was able to do something without having that disappear. So I grabbed this stencil. This is Delicate Impressions, I believe. I'll put the links to it and anything else that's special on this project in the description box. You can check out my Amazon links. And I'm using black modeling paste from the Crafter's Workshop, which is amazing stuff. Now my instincts were to use this stencil and to use black. And I was a little bit fearful until I revealed, and it was like, yes, that black. It just works so well with the script and the print that was coming through from the printables that I put in the first and second layer. So I clean off the stencil and I'm putting it up in the corner. Now I know you should do things in odds. There's really not space. I grabbed the smaller version of this stencil. It just wasn't cutting it. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do the two corners. And it kind of goes because you can see the postage stamp printable that I had there. We have that round shape that's working. So it kind of reads as the third one. Now I went and found those same birds, but a bigger one in the free printables. And I got my quote, if you want to fly, give up everything that weighs you down. Now, when I initially printed it off, it was too big. So I printed it a little bit smaller because I didn't want that to be front and center. So I'm just positioning this. Now, because I don't want it to really be the focal image, I am going to colorize this so it's more like the background. So I'm taking the two colors that I've had in the background and putting it on. And in hindsight, I might try to just put the burnt umber instead of the yellow ochre and the burnt umber. It got a little bit too much yellow ochreish. And I'm just dry brushing the burnt umber on top, kind of roughening it up a little bit. But you can see that the color of it matches the color that's at the top. And so it works well in there. Now I edge it with my archival ink, and then I use the makeup sponge and I apply the archival ink to the edge of the birds as well. It has white edges, and I didn't want anything to be white. I know I'm going to be shading this, and that might just disappear, but I had the sponge out. And adding the black just reads with the black that I put the modeling paste on. I've also done the with my charcoal pencil around the edges. So I'm gluing this down with the matte medium, and I apologize that that's off screen. I zoom in to give you a close-up, and then I just get so involved in creating that I don't look up in the little viewfinder to see that I'm actually catching what I'm doing. Now I want these birds, the one has a kind of cut off tail, and so it has to go, in my mind, over the edge. And I wanted to overlap the sentiment sign because I just felt that that just tied it all together. Got a little heavy-handed with the uh, matte medium here. So I put a good coat on it and then get up my heat tool and give this a good dry. I grabbed some black and I am using my fan brush to splatter. And again, that's to grunge it up a little bit. And I'm removing some where it fell on the sentiment a little too heavy. And then I come with gold because, well, it's me. And that, because it goes over all the layers, ties everything in yet one more way. So here's the gold, and I'm just splattering it. It's not much of a different color than the yellow ochre, but it does have that shimmer, and that, especially if I varnish this, it would really shine through. So I'm grabbed my angle brush and my black acrylic paint, and I'm using the floating acrylic technique to shade around the elements. Now this just always makes such a big difference. I will put a link to the video where I teach this technique and give you step-by-step instructions on how to do it. So if you follow that video and you do a little bit of practicing, which I guide you to how to do it, you should be able to master this technique. And I love using the shading acrylic technique because uses acrylic paint, it's permanent. I don't have to use a spray fixative or anything else. If I use a charcoal pencil or Stabilo to do this same thing, which you totally can, if you were going to varnish, you do need to take steps to set it, to preserve it. So mostly I go around the birds, and I do some shading on top of the birds just to perk it up. Doing a little more edging on the outside edges. I've gone with my charcoal pencil, but now I'm going with the acrylic. And there I'm going in between. It just felt like I needed it. Now remember the gesso that I pushed through the stencil? I'm coming and I'm shading around that. I want to bring that out. So I'm going on either side. Now there's not a whole lot of texture with the gesso. It's a very subtle texture, definitely less than when you use modeling paste, but I really like that effect. And you can see how that little bit of shading really brings it up. Now, if I was doing this again, and I will be because I've now been commissioned to do 2 of these for 2 different friends who saw the beginning piece and just fell in love with it. When I do it, I will be a little bit more, now that I know exactly where everything is going to go, I'm going to take a little bit more care about where I put the stenciling, because now I know. When you're doing art journaling, at least for me, a lot of the time, I don't have the complete picture or plan. And so there are parts of it that you could tweak, and I do, if I was to do them on a canvas or a cradled wood panel. For instance, I would avoid putting any of the gesso where the birds are. I would also make sure that there wasn't a whole lot of blue right around where the birds are. I would try to put more yellow or leave more of the vintage paper look. Also with the postage stamps or the symbols there, I would strategically place those so that I can see them. Now I'm taking my charcoal pencil here. This is General's charcoal, and I'm going around some of the elements, some of the stamping that I did, some of the stenciling, just to bring it out, and smudging. Again, to increase that vintage look, and just one more layer. So here I'm removing the tape. Now, because I had put the papers over top of it, this is why the tape isn't coming off so smooth. So I do have to grab my X-Acto knife, and I continue off camera getting all those little pieces off. It did come off in the end. It just was a little bit more more difficult than it needed to be. So there is my finished page. I am beyond thrilled with it. Here are some close-ups. Watch right to the end to get some end cards, and those are suggested videos. Give me a thumbs up, share this with your crafty friends, hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber, click on the bell, select the option to get notified of upcoming videos. Thanks so much for joining me.